Welcome back, everyone, to our final panel of today on scaling democratized research. So this panel is going to be all about how leading ReOps teams are scaling their impact, empowering non-researchers to connect with users, and building governance that keeps participant data safe. So we have two incredible panelists and our amazing moderator Crystal with us. So Lauren on the right has been leading research ops for Elsevier's healthcare products UX team since 2022, a role she co-created after being a UXR for 4 years there. A polymath at heart, over the past 15 plus years, she's worked in various roles across UX, operations, development, and content. She lives in Philly and has a soft spot for information architecture, furry friends, and sci-fi. Love it. Deeptha in the middle is a UX research leader specializing in AI and emerging technologies. As a UX research lead at SmartBear, she's built research departments from the ground up, mentored growing teams, and partnered with senior leaders to shape product strategy. Previously, Deeptha led research on wearable technology at Meta, focusing on trust, usability, and user adoption. And this conversation will be moderated by Crystal, who is an award-winning UX designer and researcher with over 20 years of experience. As a senior research operations consultant at Rally, she helps teams do their best work by building the systems, tools, and cultures that support great research. Previously, she led UX and research operations at MongoDB, Vanguard, Comcast, and others. Crystal, I will pass it over to you to get us started.
Yay. This is my first event as a Rally employee, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm no stranger to speaking at some of Rally's stuff in the past, but really excited to be here to talk about this because this was like my bread and butter at MongoDB when I was there. Was already democratized, just nothing was in place when I was there. But I want to hear from these ladies. Can you tell me a little bit about your current role and kind of the scale and scope of research operations at your organization right now? Are you a team of one, team of many? Size of your research? Let's start with you.
Yeah, okay, I can go first. First of all, thanks everyone for joining us. I know we're standing between you guys and happy hours, so I do appreciate that. So I'm a UX researcher over at SmartBear. They do B2B software developer tools. And in 2023, when I joined our research team, you're looking at half of it right now. But since then, in the past 3 years, we've scaled it, and we've also been able to scale our footprint at the company and within the company's ecosystem. A lot of that ties into the governance perspective, which I'm sure you've heard a lot today and will continue to be drilled in throughout this talk as well. So, yeah, I can hand it over to you.
Sure. Okay, that's working good. Yeah, so I am at Elsevier, and for those that don't know, Elsevier is quite a large company, a global company that works in the healthcare and scientific space, traditionally in publishing. We have a lot of digital products as well. Myself and my ReOps colleague, we're a team of two. We're very small, very mighty, like probably most of you and other ReOps folks out there. We just support our UX organization, or I should say our one UX organization within the healthcare product space. So that is made up of about 70 designers and researchers, so still quite a lot of people. And yeah, they're all empowered to do self-service research. And it is just the two of us. For a while, it was just myself, and then we had the second specialist come on board to help. We definitely need more people at some point.
Awesome. Many teams begin their research ops practice with not much there. What was your journey like starting research operations in place here at the Foundations? Start with you, Lauren.
Yeah, so the way that my journey started was, so I was a senior researcher on the same team that I'm supporting now. And the way I like to put it is, like, we had like unofficial research ops or nascent research ops, right? Meaning that there was no dedicated function or person in a role doing that. So it was sort of done essentially as part of the job of you know, management on the UX team. But as the team grew, it became more and more apparent that not only did we need someone to take that on in a dedicated role, but the thing that ended up catalyzing it for us was that we needed to stand up a centralized CRM because of the size of the team to handle all of our research logistics, our participant database, and for us, most importantly, to handle incentives or gift cards. So not perhaps the most exciting catalyst, but it was honestly those kinds of the gift cards and the compliance risks around that kind of catalyzed the need to stand all this up, which I kind of volunteered for essentially, and then helped make the case to say, look, it's not just standing up this one thing and then being done with it. Like this and other things need to be maintained, supported, grown over time, and as our team grown. And you know, it's funny looking back, we had to make that case, and of course we were successful. And now we're in a position where there's 2 of us, still too much to do, and like people can't imagine not having our function. And I should say we are actually the only dedicated research operations team in the whole company. So we're kind of hopefully showing other people the importance of it.
Okay. So my first exposure, okay, hopefully you guys can hear me. My first exposure to research ops was my first job after college. I worked over at Vanderbilt for their hospital. And so my manager there was one of their surgeons. She was basically looking for someone to handle all things research while she was doing brain surgery, so no pressure. And so, I mean, that was, I think, at that point, the biggest challenge was where do you even begin? There was no research department. There was nothing. We didn't have like a name. So it was, where do you even get started? And then over time, as my career grew, I got more comfortable with developing research, scaling research. And then at my current job, I think the biggest problem, those challenges evolved from, you know, getting myself comfortable with establishing research to getting other teams comfortable with the research that we're establishing and getting them to see the value of research.
Okay, let's talk about quick win that you had, something that really got you started in the place that you are to have more wins later. What was one of your first quick wins?
Yeah, so for us, again, repeating myself a bit, it all goes back actually to those gift cards. This might be very unique to my organization. In fact, I hope it was, because the process to incentivize research participants was so painful that that was like a selling point, but also, and a true selling point, but also the thing that was the researchers, designers, the thing they got the most excited about. Because we went from people having to put it on their corporate cards, needing executive approval for every single gift card, for every single study, not to mention the risks that entails in terms of compliance with lack of centralized oversight of dispersing those. So that would take weeks. People doing research would have to touch gift cards multiple times throughout their study to, in the new system, the click of a button. And I said, look, it's magic, you know, in my roadshows. So yes, it was that selling point for researchers, but also it was a huge win for like taking away that compliance risk for the company. So like to leadership to say, look what we did. We solved a huge like business issue. So not the most exciting, but honestly, it was a really big win.
And I think for me, probably, I think I'm going to call back to the challenge that I mentioned earlier, which is, you know, getting buy-in from stakeholders. So it's SmartBear, my current company. Our research team is in its infancy. So before, you know, our team had existed, the challenge was a lot of the PMs, the designers, they were all doing the research. And I think there's absolutely a time and a place for other teams to do research. And I actually think that it shows that they're engaged in the value of research. But I also think UX research is a very specialized skill, and we still definitely deserve at least a seat at the table. And we have a perspective that other teams may not have. And so that was a bit of a tough sell, because to these teams that had been doing basically our job that we just were hired to do, they were like, we don't need you. We've been doing this. And so one way that we kind of went about it is I would invite them to our research calls. And I know PMs are busy, so it wasn't for everything, but maybe ones I thought that were going to be particularly interesting. I'd like send them an invite and I just have them join me on the ground level. They get to see, you know, what other information I was getting from the exact same customers that they were talking to, because we're B2B, so we talk to the same customers basically each month. And so that I think was really exciting. And my director was telling me, actually, we had a PM who at the very start was kind of dragging her feet and she was like, I don't see the point of this. I don't get it. And afterwards she was raving about research and was like, I have an idea for next month and the month after of what we can do for research. So music to my ears.
Yeah, can I actually just add one more thought to that? In terms of being in a democratized environment, I think the other sort of I don't know if I'd call it a quick win, but something that was an obvious benefit out of the gate was suddenly we had a dedicated person to help answer all the questions and support the team as we rolled out this new system and everything. Whereas before we didn't have that, and so people would, you know, they wouldn't be able to get their questions answered in a timely fashion, they get stuck and everything. So I guess for having research ops in general, you know, just that was a very early win, I think, for us, because it was democratized. There's just, you know, a lot to support.
Awesome. Well, I want to flip it a little bit and talk about also, what do you wish you didn't do, or that you might have overthought or over-engineered in those early days? You got an example for that?
Yeah, I could speak to that. I like to bet that 90% of this room is filled with perfectionists. I myself am one, kind of the person where if I miss a streak on like Wordle or LinkedIn games, I go crazy. So I know it's like, so when I was starting off with research or like, you know, building programs and stuff, I think the perfectionist side of my brain was telling me I had to make it perfect before we even move to the next step, and that I had to make sure it was perfect from day one. And I just don't think, I've learned that's not really the right way to go about it. I mean, even we see in the product space, we're iterating even after launch, right? So I think we can take those lessons and bring them internally within our research or research ops space. We can we can get it good enough and then continue to iterate even beyond that. I've just noticed that within industry, things are moving really quickly. Things are always changing. So even if you get something perfect and then it changes, then you have to go back and make it perfect. So you just really can't outrun it. And so I think it's more important to, you know, get it good enough and then continue to iterate and make it better over time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying about not trying to get something perfect out of the gate. We try to take a mindset of like piloting something with like just the research team or like a few researchers and designers, like taking like a UX, you know, a sort of a research approach to things and rolling them out in general. So I like that.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I had sort of like a serious answer and then a semi-serious answer to the question. So I guess to start with the real thing I wish I had not over-engineered. It's a very finite example, but maybe some of you feel this pain. So when I first started ReOps on my team, and because of the big project that was a catalyst for all that, one of the things I had to do was take 8 different panels, or what my team called user pools, with different panel sign-up forms, which were all unique, but also similar in certain ways with different variables and, you know, data points that they were collecting about their unique Snowflake participants. I had to consolidate that into one panel for the whole team. And people felt a lot of ownership about like, oh, but, you know, we need this data about our users for this product, you know, and I would meet with them to like work out what maybe we could get rid of, what do we really still need, etc. And so long story short is I still have the same panel sign-up form or opt-in form. It's very complicated. It's very complicated logic to support all these different user segments, user types to flow through it, to see some questions, not see others, see certain response options, and it's very brittle because of that. It's hard to make changes, and I sort of like, oh, I wish I'd kept it simpler. I do have some ideas about how to move forward with that, but it's kind of painted ourselves into a corner with our panel opt-in. So that's just like one very specific example. The other thing is like I mentioned, having dedicated folks to answer questions. That was great at the beginning. Our team has grown, and so sometimes we can be overrun by questions. I forget who mentioned, it's death by paper cuts a little bit of the time. So now we're trying to figure out how to actually take that burden ourselves, either through almost like democratizing that part of ops a little bit. And I do have some things I do to crowdsource Q&A. And again, maybe looking at like a agentic, some kind of a ReOps bot that trained on our, documentation that can answer some basic questions.
Yeah, I sent an agent in your future. I wanted to give one example for mine that I over-engineered in my past, and that was trying to make Adobe Sign work for gathering consent. So somebody talked about how awful DocuSign was. Adobe Sign, I think, is worse. The vendor that we had running this is before we got Rally at MongoDB, the vendor that we used had a consent option, but it was so basic. And there were all these demands for having different kinds of consents and a more complicated consent process. And they wanted consent to happen at different moments. And the vendor tool is just so simplistic that it couldn't serve that I thought that was so important. Why don't I just keep experimenting with Adobe Sign to make it work? And really, we just needed a good enough consent form to democratize research so that we weren't doing research without consent, and then work on expanding consent practices later, which we did end up doing through Rally. Another question is scaling. So we talked about like things early on that we did that maybe we shouldn't have done or would have done differently, some quick wins. What was one of your first scaling moves to try and make the research operations practice?
I can take that. So whenever I join a new company, first thing I do is I just talk to everyone. And I love talking, but two, I think it's a lot of fun to get to know everyone's workflow, where they see gaps. Even they don't even have to be like on UX team. If it's anyone I'm interacting with, like PMs or sales or marketing, getting to know them and seeing like what is their workflow like, where are there maybe gaps? What am I supposed to do as my job as a UXR? Like how can I best mitigate those problems that they're hearing? And I think I just stop and I listen for a little bit. And then from there, I prioritize. I know that was mentioned in one of the earlier talks as well. I think it's really important. There's always a lot that people have to say. So taking what you've heard as a researcher, you can affinity map or do whatever you want, and prioritizing, what is most critical and how coming up with a game plan based off of that, how to address it. That also comes back to what I was mentioning earlier of like when you're putting together like a research department basically from scratch, that can be really overwhelming because it's like, where do you even begin? And so I think you can begin with the data that you already have with the people at your company. I think that's a great way to go about it, and also build those relationships, which I think are equally important.
Yeah, I think for us, again, I'll probably sound a little bit like a broken record, because of the situation that ReOps was kind of birthed in, for lack of a better word, in my org. Like, it was like, I don't know, does this make sense? We're sort of birthed in the fire of scaling. So by that I mean, we realized we had a big enough team, again, that we needed to take our duct tape system of like a scheduling tool and different spreadsheets and 8 different, opt-in forms and associated user panels, different ways incentives were being done, et cetera, consent, and stand up something that would allow that to be consistent and scalable across the whole team. So that was really the first big effort, and it allowed all the research already happening at scale to be done much more effectively and efficiently, because researchers and designers weren't having to spend as much time doing like manual data entry in our spreadsheets. Like we had all these instructions that were like to, you know, fill out this column and this column every time you talk to someone and all this. Well, now that's all tracked automatically, that kind of thing. And again, I already talked about how much faster the incentives were. Just briefly to mention, I think like, you know, since we've gotten operations going, kind of one of the first things that I said, oh, I actually need to, like, here's like kind of a new thing I need to scale, like once we got going, was that I was doing one-on-one onboarding and training onto our research processes and tools for every single new hire on the team, designer or researcher. Very high touch. You know, I felt that was important, and I still do, but I made some tweaks to scale it, so I wasn't thinking as much of my own time into that, but still kind of keep a human touch. Basically a combination of creating training videos, but then also meeting with people to create that gate to then allow them to access the tools and do research.
You know, it's one of the things that I did too, is you can't train everybody in person one-on-one, but rather setting some rules around your first 3 studies through Rally need to be verified at these 2 points. You know, you can't publish it until we looked at it. Here's why. And being really responsive for that, set them up for success, having a template as well that they can duplicate, compliance questions already in there with logic.
Yes,
was like a key thing to set them up for success as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I also hope everybody, their first study in the system, they have to have reviewed by ResearchOps. Yeah. Maybe I should do the first 3 though sometimes.
We can never catch everything in the first one, and particularly designers in the org that I was in weren't always doing studies. So the first one they would do it, and then 2 months later they wouldn't need to do one, and then they'd need to do another one, and they'd forget everything. So we kept a little tally of it for them. But how do you define governance? So we talked a lot about that in the beginning, but how do you make sure that that is an accelerator, not a block? How do you speak about governance and compliance type stuff?
Yeah, I see governance as any sort of like structure that's given to a company that gives them some sort of framework or organization. I think you heard a lot about it today. I know kind of maybe outside this room, a lot of people see it as red tape. I would argue it's the opposite. I actually think having structure, having that governance can give you more freedom to do what's actually important. So when you're not worried about, you know, how is your participant data secure? Did someone make like their link of participant data public to everyone in the world? Like when you're not worried about that, you can actually focus on the content, what people are saying, and move on to strategy, which like as kind of we were saying that last talk with, you know, AI hot takes, research is just, it's more than just compiling insights and talking to people. It's also that strategy component as well. So I think the more that you can leave to that governance, that basic framework, the more you can spend on things that make you unique as a researcher and irreplaceable.
Yeah, in my context, I usually talk about it to both the leadership, but also to people, like as part of the onboarding, really, and kind of explaining ResearchOps and everything to them, is that I really view it as like, it is our job to like set the rails, like set up the guardrails, and then you're able to just stay on the rails, right? They're there for you. So you don't, like you were saying, you don't have to worry about, am I using the right consent form, let alone like come up with one yourself, or am I over contacting users? Because it's all baked into the systems that we have. And I think another good metaphor, it's like, yeah, it's not like red tape, it's like bumpers in a bowling lane, right? Like you just bowl, and I don't know if this totally works. Like you can bowl and like get a spare or a strike because you had the bumper. Maybe that works. And you don't have to worry about going into the gutter because you, went outside. Those bumpers are off the rails. And so that speeds you up, right? You can just go and do your research. You can focus on the research, and you don't need to focus on the operational underpinnings. Like, it's like, we got you. A lot of times when new people join the team, they're so surprised and delighted that we have research ops, and like they're like, oh great, like you have participant panel already, great, we like have these things in place, rather than seeing it as like, I have to like use these things most of the time. So yeah.
Outside of training, what other kinds of frameworks or toolkits have you created to help non-researchers do safe, ethical, efficient research using our operations?
Yeah. Do you want to go, or I can go first?
Oh, it's better.
So yeah, I think I like how you started with outside of training. So yes, we have training. So I think it's all about what happens after the training and can kind of grow up with training. So we have, and I think I was chatting with a few folks before this about documentation. Like, we have very, very thoroughly documented procedures, templates, etc., for the team to use. Now, it's a bit of a balancing act because some folks will get overwhelmed by that, and people sort of want things documented so that it is self-serve, but also too much can be overwhelming. So that's still a nut we're trying to crack. But it's all there so that they can, self-serve when they have questions, and they can follow along step by step about how to go from planning a study to running it in our system, doing your recruitment, to doing analysis, etc., and presenting and managing the findings that come out of it. And a sort of a program that we have that it's not something that Research Ops manages it independently, but we have something called Study Buddies, which I support, but is really run by not only our research director, but our senior researchers. So we have different study buddy groups that we call them that are aligned to the two main business units, our researchers and designer support. And it's a place where designers, but also researchers, can get essentially peer review and feedback on their studies, whether it's the study plan itself, the methods they're using, their moderation script, their survey, what have you, their screener, although a lot of times they'll come to ReOps for that. And so it's something we emphasize in the onboarding. It's something we actually track if people are using, and people are encouraged to keep using that. So that kind of covers the craft side of the quality question. And then for ReOps, we have office hours, which people can come to with any question they have. And then I have a Slack channel for support, where we also post ReOps announcements whenever there's changes. And so I encourage, one of the main things I encourage people to do is post in there when you have questions. Don't email us privately or email me or DM me and my coworker, because it silos not only the question, but also the answer, and it prevents sharing that knowledge. Like, someone else might have the same question and answer. But also, most importantly, we might be busy, might be out of the office. So allowing other designers even, or researchers who have been around the block a few times, to jump in and answer those questions to help those people, it helps ReOps, it helps them, it helps everybody. So I think for us, that's part of the equation of really enabling people to do research well. We're still working on training on actual methods and things like that. That's something we want to improve on.
So I think sometimes people think because I'm a UXR, I don't want anyone else to do research. I want to do it all. That can't be further from the truth. I think for me, and maybe I'm sure a lot of you guys, we get maybe an hour or so with these participants. It's not a lot of time to cover every single thing that everyone wants to know about our users. And so it is nice for there to be self-service research for people at least for things that maybe we can't prioritize that much, so things don't slip through the cracks. We also have like templates for basic things. So if we're trying to do persona research, if we're trying to understand workflows, something we can add to a larger repository and analyze on a larger scale, that's something that PMs can absolutely do and take that activity in their own hands. I also think because, as I mentioned earlier, we have our PMs in on some of these calls, mostly for buy-in, but I think it also is helpful because then we don't have to do any training with them in that instance of like, how do you go about these sessions like UXR? Because they're seeing it in real time. They're able to get in that mindset because they've seen it so much and been on that ground level with us.
Some things that I've done: consent guidance and decision tree. When do you need to have NDA? When can you use the vendor's built-in consent? If you're using something like user testing or a pool where you actually have to consent to things to be a member of that. So there are opportunities to kind of reduce some of the friction and processes. Compliance guidance, helping people figure out if they can reduce some of the number of compliance questions. In some cases, you can. You might not need to ask age. Or what we were able to do is actually build age into the consent forms. People had to acknowledge there explicitly that they were over the age of majority in their jurisdiction, with examples of what that might look like instead of having to ask them for that PII data. Just as a couple of small examples to add to the mix here. I think we might have time for one more question, and I wanted to focus a little bit on impact before opening it up to everybody else here. What does impact look like in your org? What metrics actually resonate with leadership when it comes to research?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think for us, it's not one particular metric, like it's not like time on task or success rate or, you know, or even like ROI. It's not even like one specific metric will always speak to every single stakeholder in every single situation. Sometimes it is really project dependent. And I think what's most important is actually that story that you're tying those metrics into. So, you know, maybe you put a feature or button somewhere that's more available. Like, yes, you might see on like Pendo or Amplitude that it has 75% more interactions, but like, what does that mean? You need to have it in the context of, you know, maybe people are saying, oh, I didn't know this feature existed until I saw it right here. You know, you need to contextualize those metrics. So I think that's honestly more important than the what specific type of metric that you use.
So, yeah, I'll mention like in terms of research ops and then like research metrics, things that we're doing. So, honestly, we don't do a ton of measurement for different research ops metrics just because in our situation or organization, there's not a need. I do sort of like collect a lot of data, kind of have that at the ready. One of the biggest things, just an example from last year, though, that ended up being very, honestly, a really big win and something that caught the attention of leadership was the fact that our team was able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars for the company because we had research ops, and had the tooling that we had set up and related processes, had built out our own panel through that, but also had access to another on-demand panel for our vendor. The team no longer had to go to very niche, slow, expensive recruitment agencies, which we were doing up until like the prior year. So our spend on those went way down. So we saved hundreds, I can't say exactly how much, but we spent, or rather we saved a lot of money and a lot of time. And at the end of the day, I think that's a lot of times what executives, you know, care about, time and money. As far as research goes, and this is my research ops colleague spends a lot of his focus on reporting on research metrics. We have a robust program where we track and manage individual research findings in JIRA, actually. To sum it up, the reason is that those live and then are managed where the development work is being done so that we can directly trace the impact to the product and the engineering work that's being done to address those findings. So we have reporting that has been very impactful and has gotten a lot of attention coming out of that about how many findings are actually being addressed and considered done in the product, but also how many, you know, how how and where are those findings stuck, show issues in our product development pipeline, things like that. So that's a big focus of our research practice at large right now that our director is very focused on.
It's very exciting,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of work to
Yes.
make sure all the findings end up in Jira.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add is at MongoDB, number of projects informed by research. It's a kind of high-level metric, but with a customer-first mindset that the company has, being able to trace every research project that comes through with a brief, it gets a ticket in Jira, and you attach a goal or business objective to it, so you can trace back, this is a research issue type that is attached to that business goal. So you can have that kind of metric to say, yes, we did research, and trace it back down. May not get to the individual insights,
Right.
but at least that project was touched by research and informed by it. And another one that was important because of the customer mindset is the number of people we were talking to on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis throughout the year, being able to show that not only were we talking to an increasing number, but we were able to divide that by the kinds of people we were talking to, and that we were talking to fresh prospective people as well. So unique people was an important value for the company. I wanted to open it up for you all so we can get to happy hour and ask even more questions of each other. What questions do you have for us on scaling and democratizing research?
I think sometimes one of the struggles with research democratization is getting people to engage with the tools, the processes you're setting up. So I'm interested to see, like, how have you promoted engagement? How have you promoted designers and PMs coming to you to be able to then do their own research?
Yeah, I think you have to meet them halfway a little bit, because I've definitely faced that where we'll introduce 20 different tools that PMs are never in except to talk to UX research. And I do think, like, while it does make our job easier, I think we do have to think about also their workflow and what tools do they use and how we can find integrations and common ground. Doesn't mean that we have to use every tool that they use, but I think that it's important to prioritize and try to find something in the middle that they can still jump into and see and then jump out of their flow.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit also. So I will say, like, I think I'm in a unique situation where that makes democratization a little bit simpler, I will admit. So my team is just researchers and designers, we're a UX team, and the two of us as research ops, our remit is just to support this team. We don't have the the ability to support the whole company. So there definitely are PMs, salespeople, et cetera, out in the company at large. So we're like probably 10,000 people in the company doing research in their own way or having some kind of customer conversation. So that's something maybe like 5 years down the road, we'll get to a point where we have global ReOps and like we are trying to support them as well. But for our team, we're sort of not that it's perfect and there are some issues, but you join our team if you want access to our tools and to do research. You're trained on it, and that's your ticket to like perform research. So not that people can't go a little rogue either unintentionally or because of not understanding something within those, but it's not like we're not in a position where we need to sort of like persuade, kind of like, this is how you need to do it.
Hi, thank you. This has been awesome. Question about as you're scaling up your research practice, what kind of tactics have you used to help with kind of maintaining rigor so that executives or people higher up aren't saying things like, you want to operate just on product intuition and things like that, but really kind of sticking to a lot of core UX research principles and kind of training everybody up to maintain those standards?
Yeah, I can speak a little of that first. So I think for us, it's definitely something we're continuing to try to improve. It's like one of the big challenges we do wrestle with, to be honest. Now, the ways that we do tackle that currently are, like I mentioned, just within the UX team, we have study buddies programs so that we are trying to encourage people as much as possible to get peer feedback on their studies. Yes, like designers going there to get feedback from researchers, but also researcher to researcher, right? Everyone can use a second pair of eyes. When I was a researcher, I used it all the time. And so instilling that quality, we are also very big on a library of best practices for research that we have, separate from sort of the nuts and bolts processes that I manage, but like, they're BPs, as we call them, best practices on, everything from analysis to individual research methods such as formative usability, summative usability, what's the difference when you do which. We actually have a which method when documentation as well. So essentially we do what we can to train researchers, and we have sort of training, optional training or learning sessions with the whole team, including designers, on those things. So really doing what we can to spread awareness of those. And we have a lot of templates that, again, people are supposed to be using. So we have that consistency so that we both have that quality and consistency across as much as possible across the board. But it really is something that we're trying to improve given our limited people resources of how do we continually train an army of designers and like less experienced researchers, and we have experimented with a few different flavors of training programs that we're still working on, and happy to chat more after this about that.
And we also do have a list of best practices as well at my company. I'd say on top of that, we're really, really collaborative. So we're constantly meeting, like not only just like the UX research team, but we'll meet as like a design team, or we'll even have like, at a higher level, meet with teams beyond that, like cross-functionally. And we'll discuss our research, see how other people are doing things. And we'll also have like, I don't know what you would call them, but basically we would have like a UX meeting with the entire team, where it's one person who comes in and they talk about, something new that's happening in the field, or they, are basically do a presentation on something that they found interesting, or something recently that they had accomplished and found really interesting. So I think that's really great. Like even this panel, I have like 3 pages of notes that I'm going to sneak back to my team this next week. So I think those are all ways to maintain some of that rigor and without like having those like formal training documents. It's a way to get people to think a little bit more outside of the box of what's traditional UX.
Any more questions? We're good?
People want to, yeah.
Come find us with more questions in the happy hour.
That's the
Amazing. Thank you so much to all 3 of you. And for the rest of our speakers here today, that was such an incredible afternoon. And thank you to all of you as well for sharing your time and your energy and your questions. We really appreciate you being here with us today. I wanted to quickly call out the swag bags on the back of your chairs. Make sure to grab 1 or 2 of those. There's a few extras. But other than that, please enjoy happy hour. And yeah, be sure to stay connected with all of us. Thank you.